Peace and blessings. Jerry Ben Israel. And today I want to go over the importance of the Apocrypha. A lot of Christians don't understand the significance of the Apocrypha. For one, it was taken out of the Bible by the Protestant church. America has gotten this Christian foundation from the Protestant church. Those were the pilgrims. Those were the people who came over to America seeking to get away from the rule of England and have their own land. Those were the people who came over here and made war with the Indians up in the Boston area, trying to sustain their own culture, right? So those people are the people that are responsible for your modern day Bible, right? Now, the Apocrypha comes from a 400-year span between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Why is the Apocrypha important? I'm going to show you that today. I'm going to read some scriptures and I'm going to allow you to understand how important the Apocrypha is by what happened during those times. Now, many people don't realize that the book of Daniel chapter 2 speaks of 4 different kingdoms. So that would be Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. That would be Darius and Xerxes and the Persian Medes. That would be Alexander the Great and the Greek army, and then you had the popes in the Crusades, and also the original Roman Empire, right? So you had the physical Roman Empire, and then you had the spiritual Roman Empire, right? It died and it rose again spiritually, right? So in the Old Testament and the New Testament, you can find Babylon, Persian Medes, and you can find the Roman captivities. What you cannot find is the Greek captivity. The Greek captivity is found in the Apocrypha. That's one of the significance of it. So if you go to Daniel chapter 2, you're going to see there's 4 kingdoms. And that 3rd kingdom is the Greek kingdom. It is found in the Apocrypha. This is what the book of Maccabees was based around, right? So we're going to read a couple of scriptures out of the Maccabees, and we're going to read something from the Old Testament. So one important thing that people like to bring up about the Apocrypha is there were no prophets in the Apocrypha, right? But the Apocrypha wasn't the only time period in the Bible where there were no prophets. If you go and look at the book of Judges, there were no prophets in the book of Judges. There were only judges, right? Matter of fact, let's go to Judges chapter 21, verse 25. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in their own eyes. So there was no one to give them instruction. Everybody was just doing what was right in their own eyes. So when you go to the Apocrypha and you read verses like 1 Maccabees 4 and 46, it says, and they stored the stones in a suitable place on the Temple Mount until a prophet should come to tell them what to do with them. You go to 1 Maccabees chapter 9 to 27, it says, there was great tribulation in Israel, such as has not been since the days of the prophets had ceased to appear among them. You go to 1 Maccabees 14 and 41, it says, and the people and their priests had decided that Simon should be their leader and high priest forever until a trustworthy prophet should arise. So this time period was much like it was in the book of Judgment. They say history repeats itself. History is repeating itself in the Apocrypha. There's another thing that we have to know, because they're not teaching this, so we have to understand that during this time, this is the third kingdom. This is the rule of the Greek kingdom. Let's get that out. I'm going to get that out for you. So, if we go to First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1, it says, and it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of Persia and Medes. So we know this is after the Persian and Mede kingdom, and reigned in his stead the first over Greek. So we are transferring from the second kingdom, which is Darius in the Persian Medes, to Greece, right, to the Greek kingdom, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth. So now we have this third kingdom popping up, right? This is the Greek kingdom. We find that in First Maccabees chapter 1. All right, so just establishing the foundation of this third kingdom, let's see what type of kingdom this Greek kingdom was, because it's not written in the Old Testament, nor is it written in the New Testament, but it was prophesied by the prophet Daniel in Daniel chapter 2 that there would be a third kingdom, and it can be found in the Apocrypha. So, in First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 54, it says, now on the 15th day of the month Cathlu, in the 145th year, they set up the my phone fell. So First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 54, it says, now on the 50th day of the month Cathlu, 15th day of the month Cathlu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. Now these conquering nations, they had a way of going into Jerusalem and tearing down the walls. They were going to the tabernacle, and they would burn it down. They would go and pollute the sanctuary. These Gentiles had a way of just trying to destroy and demonize everything that was holy to us, right? So these Greeks, they were no different. They went in, they burned down the walls, they went into the sanctuary and polluted the sanctuary by sacrificing swine's flesh. So in verse 55 it says, and let's start over. Now the 15th day of the month Cathlu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. Now it says the abomination of desolation, but that is not the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24. This abomination of desolation is just them sacrificing swine's flesh during the third captivity. The abomination of desolation that was being spoken of in Matthew 24 happened during the fourth dynasty, during the destruction of Jerusalem altogether. Jerusalem is no more. So after this third dynasty, Jerusalem did win back their city and get their own and keep control of their land and rebuild the temple and sanctify it during that time, right? So the time that's been spoken of in Matthew 24 is the last and final time that Jerusalem would be destroyed and the holy people would be taken away and scattered to the four corners, right? So in verse 55 it says, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burned them with fire. So that's a very important piece of information that we need to know. During the time, that was 400 years period, during the Greek captivity, they burned up all the books of the law. We talking about every Old Testament prophet, all of our books, all our holy writings, our holy teachings, they burned them with fire. The Greeks did this. You can find that information in the Apocrypha. Why is that very important? All right, I'm just gonna keep reading. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burned them with fire. And whosoever was found with any of the book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. So it was a commandment from the king to go and burn up all the books of Israel that they found. So they went from house to house and they broke in everyone's house with military force, and they burned up the books of the law. And anybody who confessed to knowing the book of the law, or who would not denounce the book of the law, they were put to death at that time. Very important for us to know and understand historically, because they went out all of Israel. There was none that could stop him. All right, so we need to get that point out. I'm going to go back to verse 3. First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 3. We're talking about the Greeks, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. So he slew all the kings of the earth. No one could stand before Alexander the Great on this earth. He went through all the kings, made wars. So when he came to Jerusalem and he said he wanted the books of the law, he got the books of the law. Anybody who refused to give up that book, they died. Says he was exalted. So he accomplished everything that he set out to do, right? So now we're in a state that we haven't been from in forever, because now Israel doesn't have the books of the law. We already didn't have any prophets to give us direction, so now we don't even have the books of the law. This is a very terrible time. Mattathias arose in that time. You can read about him later on in First Maccabees 1 and 2. He arose. He had 5 sons, and the Lord rose him up at that time. So he had zeal, and so the people picked him, and he took his 5 sons, and he made war with the Greeks and fought back to get our land back. That's when they dedicated the temple again, and now many Israelites to this day celebrate the Feast of Dedication because of what Mattathias and his son did during the time of the Maccabees. Now, months later, further down the line, the prophet, there was a prophet named Esdras, right? We call him a prophet, but the book calls him a scribe, right? So for the sake of, just to keep it contextual, I'm going to say he was a scribe. So there was a scribe who was fluent in the book of the law, who was a man who believed in the Most High. He kept commandments. See, those things were committed to him mentally, just as Mattathias. They were committed to him mentally. He didn't need the book because during those times he was a scribe, so he read the books. He was someone who could read and write well, right? So Mattathias was of the priest. Ezra was a priest from the line of Ezra was a priest from the lineage of Levites. Okay, so he's a priest from the Levitical lineage. During his time, the Lord commissioned him to rewrite the Bible 40 days and 40 nights. So, without the scribe Esdras, we could not have had the Old Testament for us to this day. So you can go and read that in 2nd Ezra chapter 14. But 2nd Ezra 14 and 44 says, in 40 days, they wrote 204 books. So Esdras, the story goes, he told nobody not to come and look for him. And he took a couple of his people, and then they had all these books, and he said he's just going to write. He said he's just going to talk, and he told them to just write. So they wrote 200 and something books. They wrote 200 and something books during that time period. So that is the lesson today. Without those men who had faith and believed in the word and kept commandments during that time, we would the New Testament, the Old Testament would not have survived. Therefore, the prophets who came months later after Esdras and those people who are written of in Apocrypha were dead and gone, would not have the Old Testament to have learned the commandments of the Lord, to begin preparing themselves for what was to come, which was Jesus Christ. Okay? So that's how we get the scriptures. Many people think that the Bible survived from captivity to captivity. If we go and look at the American captivity, transatlantic slave trade, right, which is a continuation of the Roman captivity, right? So if we look at this captivity, we can look at the slave movie. We were just thrown on ships with no possessions, no belongings. We were stripped naked. We were beat, blooded, stripped naked, shackled and chained, thrown on ships, and brought over here to a new land and separated from our heritage. It was no difference throughout different captivities. So the only difference was we had the land at that time. And once Jerusalem was burned down and we were scattered from Jerusalem in 70 AD, we didn't have anything else. We didn't have a homeland. So our books, our heritage, our culture, it was just dissipated. You know what I'm saying? We decimated. We didn't have anything to hold on to. So when you get here, you don't have anything. You're just destroyed. You know what I'm saying? With the prophecy of Deuteronomy chapter 28, we'll be destroyed before our enemies. Right? So for that, we had to be thankful for. But that was the perfect plan of the Most High, because he had already commissioned the disciples to go out and preach the gospel everywhere. They went out, preached the gospel everywhere. They preached to the Gentiles. You had all these Gentile conversions who were not being attacked, who were not being sought after, because they weren't the chosen people of the Most High. So these Gentiles weren't being hunted down and slaughtered by great numbers, although Rome started targeting those people who started reading the Bible, if they didn't go along with the Roman Catholic way of presenting the Bible and the scriptures, that's why the Protestants arose in the first place. That's why the English church arose in the first place. So you went from Orthodox to the Catholics, right? But that's all during the Roman Empire. But those Gentiles were allowed to practice the Bible and keep the faith because we had sowed seeds. We sowed seeds. We sowed seeds to the Gentiles, therefore keeping the gospel safe. Right? Preserving the gospel in the hearts and minds of the Gentiles. That was very smart what the Most High did, knowing that he was going to do what he did with us. So that's why the Apocrypha is important. Peace and blessings. Jerry Ben Israel. I'm gone.